for all of those who just joined us and to our panelists. Welcome to the OAAA Lunch Break Series this week. I'm your host, Anna Bogger, for those of you who don't know me. And like Erica said, we have a very special doubleheader with two major industry front figures, I would say. Sophie Kelly, who's Diageo's SVP of Whiskeys North America, and Gary Vaynerchuk, who's the founder and CEO of VaynerMedia. And it's a little different, the webinar today. I think it's going to be really cool. The first half hour, we'll talk about creativity through crisis with Sophie and Gary, and what I hope to be a very revealing conversation. And then after that, we'll deep dive into some of Diageo's key out-of-home activations and get Sophie's thought on what the client side wants from the sell side, you know, a topic that I know is very important to our audience and matter a lot. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. And I want to start with congratulating both Sophie and Gary. Sophie for making liquor stores in the US essential business during the pandemic, just like we actually did with out of home. But really mostly, I want to thank Diageo for keeping spirits widely available and the whiskey flowing. Definitely been appreciated by me and I think a lot of people out there. And Gary, who will say, we probably actually even have my daughter on this call. She's like, who are you doing this webinar with? And I'm like, his name is Gary Vaynerchuk. Oh, you know him? Big TikTok fan of yours.
Thank you.
So congratulations on that. You have a way wider following than I thought you did. Not surprised. But I also want to congratulate you on managing to sell your D2C Empathy Wines company to Constellation Brands mid-pandemic. And secondly, for VaynerMedia winning the TikTok social media account last week, despite all the controversy and possible ban, that was a great and I'm sure complicated win. So
yes,
congratulations to both of you. It's great to have you here. Want to begin with some geolocation. Sophie, where are you sheltering in place? And Gary, same to you. Looks like you're in Manhattan, but Sophie, you start.
Yeah, no, I'm in Sag Harbor. Very lucky, very comfortable. Yeah, we'll be here for a while, I believe.
Well,
I'm in Manhattan, which, you know, data shows me I might be in the safest place right now.
Yeah.
The way numbers are going. So, yeah, we're mandated closed until November with our office, likely going to push that to the end of the year. And so, feeling comfortable, you know, this is, you know, obviously I would love to be on stage with seeing all these incredible people that are jumping into the chat and saying hi, see their face, but I've found a lot of efficiencies with video and have enjoyed the things I've learned from this, kind of living in a half glass full way. There's some takeaways from this post-pandemic with the Zooms and the Google Hangouts. So in New York and learning.
Well, I'm glad that you're in New York. I hope we can all soon return. On that topic, I want to ask you, you're both two very, very social individuals and very team-driven personalities, and so connected to others and the outside world. I mean, how has this changed you as leaders, the situation we have been in? Can you talk a little bit about that, Sophie?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know if it's changed me as a leader. I think I'm just flexing different things. If I'd start by saying that connecting with your people is really important. It's never been more important. I think, you know, one of the things I think that I'm doing a lot more than I did when I was physically in person is this thing called listening with my eyes, right? Because when you're in a room with people, you can kind of get a vibe from them and see what's going on, understand who's, you know, underrepresenting, overrepresenting. Zoom can be the same, but you can also pick up a lot by just looking at the visual of and the interaction of your team. So really focusing in on that. I think the number one thing I've tried to focus on through the pandemic, I guess, and working at distance from everybody is making sure that we have a clear vision, that people are empowered to do, and they understand what they're engaging in, and that they've got the ability to go and get it done. Because when you're so isolated and you don't have the momentum or the vibe of the office or the team immediately around you, it's ever more important to know what your focus or your drive or what you're getting energy from and when you're checking back in. So just providing people with real clarity on, listen, through all the ambiguity, here's what we got to get done. You've got the power to go do it and fill me in, and we'll get it out there and we'll change it if we need to. But encouraging people to do because it makes them feel good.
Yeah, that's very true. Gary?
From my perspective, I've been focused on eliminating fear and accountability. I have a huge advantage over Soph in the fact that she's part of a very large organization and she has a ton of autonomy, but yet there are still other layers. What I do is I lean into an accountability during these times immediately on both our financial health, because that got scary real quick. We're a fast growing company in this industry, but we're still a very small company by comparison. And when you have Fortune 50 companies saying, hey, we're going to delay payments here potentially throughout the summer, fall, I'm like, yeah, that's cute. That might be a real problem. So candor, like getting in front of the company and saying, hey, this is going to be a pickle. This is not ha ha ha. Once we realized, remember everybody who's watching when we thought this was 2 weeks at home? So once you kind of understood that it wasn't that, I had to go there. And then very honestly, even with, Black Lives Matter and racial injustice, what I've been leaning into in one-on-ones, micro groups, and then in the all hands on has been candor and accountability. I reminded everybody, and to be frank, it's not fun. It's not fun to stand in front of the company and say, look, we're about to go through this period. And I want to remind all of you, I have no board. We are not publicly traded. Literally everything bad that happens the rest of this year is 100% on my accountability track. If we're doing something wrong, even if it's not me doing it, it's me because I hired the person that did it, or I hired the person that hired the person that did it. And what was interesting about that is that's my natural state. I went into that place as a child in the scheme of things during 9/11, kind of looked at my dad and said, hey, I'm really running the liquor store now. And I got this, I'll get us through this. I did it during the financial crisis in 2008. And I was proud of it. And because I always ask myself, was I able to be that accountable and that into being a wartime general, because I didn't have a lot to lose. I was a kid in 2001, in 2008, I was really building my dad's business for him. So personally, I didn't have a whole lot. I was just about to start my next chapter. This time around, I had a whole lot to lose. And I still went accountability and elimination of fear. And what that ended up doing was created a place of safety for people to navigate within. And I'm really excited about it. It's really worked. It's hurt on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. When you allow that, you're allowing your employees to say, you stink. And that's never fun. On the flip side, it's way more important to them, for them to have that feel of safety. And so I think that is the biggest requirement from leaders during this time.
Yeah, so I have to ask you, so we're in, I think, month 7 now, which is incredible. I mean, you just said it, we thought it would be 2 weeks. Maybe, I still remember when this happened, but now we're in month 7 and things have changed. And I don't feel like we have necessarily a lot more clarity on what's going on, but it still feels like we're now rooted in the situation a little bit. We kind of know how to maneuver it a little more. So what's your top focus in month 7 and going forward, as opposed to where we were maybe a month or 3 or 4 months ago? How have you changed? How are you thinking of the fall and going into 2021? I'll start with you, Sophie, again.
I'd rather follow Gary, but no, I mean, what am I thinking about month 7? I guess, to be candid, I hadn't really thought about month 7, more just I'm acutely aware of the fact that the year has been very different for everyone that works with me. We have been full steam ahead. Barely anybody's had a break or even drawn breath, versus September always represented this time of almost like back to school, getting ready for all the year reviews. So, I mean, endurance and how I keep my people motivated about what's coming up. I mean, if I were to say from a marketing person perspective, I'm just excited about our brands trying to do some good and make this giving season feel special, tap into it in a different way, understand how consumers are feeling, and, you know, I don't know. I mean, make people realize that, you know, perhaps it's not about looking at month 7, but it's just about tapping into the things that we've got energy from, continuing to be as productive as we are, continuing to be as connected we are, and moving forwards into F21 in the most powerful position.
Yeah. Well,
so endurance and energy is what I'm really focusing on continuing to supply for people. And I find that they get that by doing great work and getting it out there.
yeah. Well, at least we know the world is not going under now. I think, hopefully.
I think from my standpoint, I'm thinking about aggressive offense with anticipation for prevent defense. So, you know, for me, Vayner's in a very unique spot. Vayner has continuously beaten a drum that production is too expensive, that creative's too expensive, that we take too much risk, that we go top down. And a lot of the thematics, whether we end up being historically correct or not, a lot of the thematics and very much the skill sets that we have built have matched a lot of what's happening in the marketplace right now. And there's no question. And look, I think it's fun to be on this panel with Sophie, because I think creativity and the ability to manifest it and judge it is a true talent. And I'm thrilled, and this is fun for me to say this. I think Sophie is genuinely talented at it, right? And by the way, I think I'm talented at
You are.
which is why my stuff has worked. However, I believe that there's so much risk in the model that we've all take with strategy and creative down. And I think a lot of brands and a lot of leaders, because, you know, I've heard from them because I have these great relationships, whether they're fully on board with me, fully, by the way, on the other side of it, or somewhere in between. There's always been a respectful dialogue when I have the one-on-one conversations versus when I'm on stage and pontificating. And I think a lot of people have found some more to a ton more validity in something that I've been trying to articulate on how consumers react in these channels, or to subjective creative variables, or the production costs. So for me, to answer your question, this is important for everybody who's listening, because your businesses may be in the same place. If you're on the right side of this, right this second, you got to go real hard.
Yeah.
Like, this will go back to some sort of different version of normalcy in 6 to 12 months. And a lot of businesses, for example, my dad, I started something called Wine Text. It's a text every day and you can buy wine. It's exploding for him. And I'm trying to explain to him, Dad, you need to spend all your ad money right now, because like, people are not going to restaurants drinking wine. One day in 6 or 12 months, they will. And that's going to come out of your potential consumer base. So to answer your question, Anna, and why I gave my dad's example is, there's people should listen to this. If you're on the right, if you're winning because of this, you need to go very aggressive the next 6 months. However, you need to overlay that with the fact that the amount of money that we've printed as a government, and the amount of jobs that are out there and that won't be coming back, and the amount of people that are going to have to restructure once they're not getting subsidized by the government. So I'm going very hard to pick up new business for 2021, to expand my business for 2021. But then I'm also being overly cautious of thinking like the golden days are here, because the macro economy can hit me back where, you know, and so I think everybody has to think in those terms. That's the literal answer to your question.
Yeah. And I think I'd add to what, you know, Gary's saying, that, you know, going hard is a great way of looking at it. If we look at our business right now, the thing that we're focused on is looking at the different trends that have evolved. I mean, we were not a heavy e-com business. We have an opportunity to change that. It has not been a huge priority. Well, guess what? Right now it is, and it's a great opportunity. If you look at even trends in Scotch, Scotch is not as dynamic as bourbon, but you know what? We're seeing huge premiumization in Scotch. What's going on there? How do we fill that need? How do we do it? So you are seeing changes in the way consumers are interacting with your categories, with your brands. And if you're not listening on a daily basis, then you will not be able to go hard in a big way as hard as you should against the micro opportunities that are sitting out there in categories. So that's a more sophisticated answer to my first one, which was about endurance.
It is an incredible shift that we're seeing right now. So like, how do you follow along and make the most of that and build for a good future, right? But I want to talk about out of home, obviously, and I also want to. You mentioned this already a little bit, Gary, but it's really interesting. I mean, you moved to Belarus from Belarus to the U.S. when you were 3 years old. And then at 14, you worked at your dad's wine shop in New Jersey. And then you turned that into a $60 million e-commerce wine business, reportedly in part due to out-of-home advertising. So I would
Good news. Very
hear more about out-of-home factored in.
I'm thrilled. Two things that I think you'll like based on the context of you being in that arena. Not only is that true, and for context, obviously this makes sense, but I didn't realize I was doing it. I was doing it subconsciously. And it was the last thing you just said, by the way, Anna. I believe that every company has enough talent in it that they shouldn't be locking in things up front. And they should be adjusting to the reality of the business, and that the scale of OTT and YouTube allows brands to get what they want from television, which is the real place they have to be upfront. And by the way, here's why I'm saying this. And I had the craziest remnant billboard strategy in New Jersey history. I was buying outdoor like a maniac in real time and listen to this, doing creative. Literally Scott Farnham, big shout out Scott Farnham if you're watching, would call me and be like, here's a block of some stuff you can have for 4 to 6 weeks. I would then design the creative for the billboard in real time based on what pictures were doing well on MySpace and what topics on Wine Library TV were popping and what Google AdWord copy was driving the most CAC. And so like literally what we live today on how we think about doing, the next time I get to dance with Soph officially, because we've got some great times together, I want to make 100 pieces of content a day on whatever the remit is against 13 cohorts that matter, see what works and populate up like we did with Mr. Peanut. We didn't kill Mr. Peanut for Planters on a whim on the Super Bowl. We did it after getting tremendous insight. And, for all the jokes that people make about it, whether they love it or dislike it, because Baby Nut's been a controversial character, here's what's not debatable. What's not debatable is the business has double-digit growth over 2 years, the 2 years we've been working on it, after 9 years of declining. That's real life. So if I know we have an example together in your 4 walls where there's no debate. So, Anna, I was huge on outdoor and I continue to be a fan, but as you can imagine, I'm looking for angles of the cost of media. That doesn't mean you don't lock in Times Square or things of that nature, but I do think, it's the same reason I love Super Bowl. I think Super Bowl is underpriced. But when I look at outdoor, I definitely play between locking in a solid location at a certain price versus playing the remnant crowd. And we have an incredible execution going on with some of our clients at P&G on a project where we're getting some really successful results, we believe, from outdoor based on the measurement, predicated on a single piece of content that went viral on Facebook and became the creative pillar for the outdoor. This industry thinks about brand positioning from a great strategist and a creative on TV down, digital and everything else follows that very educated, very talented guess. I believe the way to work outdoor and everything for that matter is to win with affirmation on quant and qual business and marketing data in the digital channels and come up with the connection point against all those cohorts and make the creative and brand stand on that pillar. And I think outdoor is a meaningful potential partner in that model because people are reaffirming visuals that they've seen on their digital device over and over again instead of seeing something for the first time. I think there's something there.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree. And I think as we develop our medium to become much more automated, programmatic, and digital, I think, there are lots of the things that you said in there where we can, really provide even more meaningful help.
Can I say one thing about, Nathan brought up a great thing. Nathan said previously, I've suggested out-of-home is not a priority medium and somewhat of waste versus digital and social. Why the perspective change? Nathan, you know what has happened? I think that I am doing a better job in my growth and maturity of creating more context around my absolute statements on stage, right? Nathan, at the time when I was talking about like, hey, people are looking at their phones, they're not looking at billboards, it was in the remarks of where pricing on outdoor was in 2015 versus 2005 without factoring in that cell phones had entered our life cycle. And I was challenging the fact that they shouldn't have gone up in price. One should argue that from a common sense layer, they actually should have gone down in price, because anybody with that lens would argue that more eyes, attention had to shift to the phone, the people on the bus, the people driving even, let alone passengers. So Nathan, I think to your point and to your credit, when you're in a 40-minute keynote and you're trying to get a point across that people haven't really accepted or seen, I feel like in my younger stage, I would go for an absolute statement where I didn't do a nice enough job contextualizing the proper thought. I would argue that Sophie probably understands this, because when we got into actual meetings versus what she probably knew about me before we got the chance to really get to know each other in business, in that 2 hours I can articulate. In that 13 seconds or in a soundbite on a panel, or when I'm in the zone and I'm just off the charts and hyperbolizing, I don't think I did a good enough job clarifying it. So I think that's the answer to your question, Nathan. I think in general, that's something I'm trying to be thoughtful about. So,
and I think to your point, Gary, it's like when we're dealing in an industry which actually still struggles to accept that you should gravitate towards the content that people want from you and then amplify it with media versus top-down media planning or top-down strategy planning, you almost have to go harder. Like we have a brand that we shared, Bullet, and you know that has not 100%. Been on any mainstream media for the last 8 years. Okay, it's driven by doing experiences in the real world, which are a little problematic right now, let me tell you, and amplifying that content to the core audience digitally and beyond, and including outdoor. But that medium is an amplification of the content that people have created. So, you know, and like, look, not for nothing, but this is the largest share gainer in North American whiskeys right now. And nobody could get their head around it. They kept saying to me, where's the scale? And I'm like, well, do you want the number? Or do you just want to know why we're not on television?
The scale is the death of 1,000 cuts that is based on relevance, which leads to consideration, not potential reach.
Yes. So sometimes we go a little extreme in order to get someone to think about a different organizing model for media, I think. Anyway.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for answering Nathan's question too. That's great. I hope Nathan's happy.
I don't understand how he can follow the chat and answer the questions. I'm not that good, people. You're going to have to be more direct with me. Just trying to keep my dog quiet.
We're gonna take questions in the end too, and we have limited time with Gary, so I want to make sure that we get the most out of it. So I want to ask you, Gary and Sophie, but mostly Gary, because Sophie and I will talk more about out of home a little later. I would say you're the #1 social and digital evangelist. Are you only digital, or are you media agnostic? You sort of answered, but
I'm 100% media agnostic. By the way, in 11 to 12 years, I'm probably going to be the most anti-social, because all that happened was that people caught me in the advertising lens in the era where social was grossly underpriced against if you knew how to actually execute against it. So I'm you know, to me, all I cared about was direct mail in 1995. Like, I really started the process of building my dad's business because of direct mail and print, full page ads in the Star Ledger and the New York Times. Then it was outdoor and local cable television. I ran on my Instagram the other day, my original local TV ad. Then Google AdWords and email marketing really changed the game for me. And I was like, wow, this is wildly more impactful against what I'm spending, which started the digital understanding, which led to blogging, but I couldn't write, and I still can't. All 5 of my New York Times bestselling books are because I record them, and I have a great Stephanie Land book partner that structures it. So I had to miss blogging, and then I went right into YouTube. I started a YouTube show about wine 5 months after YouTube launched. Like, not a soul knew what it was. And this has always been my knack of and then social. So if I started VaynerMedia in 2003, I would be the search guy, right? And so I'm 100% agnostic. I'm obsessed with underpriced variables, and it's nuanced. No, listen, I'm looking at who's talking, and I'm looking at my LinkedIn, and like, you know, I'm not unaware that talking about buying outdoor reminently is maybe not exactly how the macro people that resell it want to, because there's probably some different profit margins. But all I know is how to make sure when Sophie says, Gary, I want to work with you on this, I get petrified. I think it's mainly because my dad scared the shit of me as a kid of don't waste any money. When we get a remit, I'm scared to waste $1. And what I basically do, and I've come to learn, this is funny, talk about being an outsider. Literally, I was in a meeting 6 months ago. I'm like, am I a media planner? Like, and everybody on my team started laughing. I was like, they're like, yes. And I was like, oh, right. Because all I think about is like, here's the money I have and how do I spend it to make sure. But what I am is a media planner and a creative from the 70s, because I can't think about that media without thinking about the creative and vice versa. So I'm agnostic, Anna. I really, really, really like to be able to measure things. A lot of my favorite things in brand, an NBA patch, a billboard in Times Square, you know, even a Super Bowl spot, really hard to fully measure it unless you decide to make the creative quite transactional. But I'm agnostic, but I'm white hot when something's at scale and underpriced. Like, I promise you, 99% of people in marketing are completely lost on how effective Facebook is. I promise you.
I want to ask on that. I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but I really want to speak as much out of you both as long as we have you. We talked about social, and now you're moving back into Facebook, and we talked about Black Lives Matter before a little bit as well. Both of you, for yourself and you know, for you, Sophie, I guess, but Gary too. When do you recommend brands who went dark over the hate speech issues and misinformation to return to Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, as you talked about before?
I'll go first on this, Soph, because I got to run in a second. I'll let you, you know, you've got to think this through more as an official employee of a large organization.
If it were me, it would be easy.
Correct. I think, let me give you some insight that I'll try to be, I want to make sure I don't, not my clients, though some of my clients, and I have had conversations, because I have a lot of CMO and friends who don't work with us, to a T. The majority of people that did the boycott are not happy with their decision and are trying to figure out how to get back on. Here's why. The consumer didn't even know it was happening. What happens in corporate America a lot is people, now listen, the real answer is when they want to. If you feel in your soul that Facebook or anything else is bad and not good for your brand and is detrimental and anything else, then you have to make a decision. What I was reminding a lot of people is you can't ask your company to be your activist on behalf of you, the human being. And we saw some of those undertones. Number two, there was hypocrisy at the highest levels. Does anybody understand what's happening on YouTube and Google search? Does anybody understand what's happening on print and television medium? Like one of the things that was really sad for me going through this exercise of consulting and talking and pontificating and thinking and helping was how many people didn't even know what they were asking for. My opening question, Anna, let's role play. You're the CMO of XYZ car company. My opening question, you're like, hey, I need your help on this. Like, what do you think? What do you know? I'm like, well, what would you like to happen? And the inability for 9 out of 10 to articulate anything that made any sense of what actually goes on in Facebook was staggering. And then B, I think people got a real lesson, especially anybody who has DTC brands. Some of these brands, you know, did huge M&A deals and have some DTC brands. They are completely naive to how effective Facebook is. And so, and the worst part is the end consumer didn't give anybody credit for it. It's not like somebody ran out and bought more XYZ because they were thrilled with the boycott. And so this was a sloppy execution, in my opinion. One can do anything and can boycott anything they want, but when you can't answer why, and you can't contextualize the fact that every other platform has the same variables in place in different executions, you're in a little bit of a pickle. And I think a lot of people got caught making emotional decisions, and most people just jumped on the wave in the fear that they weren't going to be on board and got called out.
Yeah. Sophie,
Yeah, look, I've got to, as Gary said, I do have to be a little careful on my answer here. I have a very strong personal point of view, but I've got a lot of empathy for what Gary is saying. Look, just speaking candidly, I can answer what our issue was, but I can't answer the second question that Gary raised, which is this just this platform's issue? And the answer would be no. Okay. So, I think really the intent was to be true to the fact that no one wants their content turning up in the wrong environment or to the wrong consumer that it shouldn't be going to. And there was great enough concern on that for people to pull back. When will we be going back on? We have to go back on because Gary's insight about consumers not seeing the issue that we see, which is just a straight out compliance, safety issue, particularly when you work in alcohol, is true. So we have to keep working in partnership to make the environment as safe as it is, but it is a critical channel to reach our consumers. So, sloppy, maybe. I would rephrase that from our point of view as an attempt to get a better partnership around a safer environment for our brands to operate. You know what? Did it work? Not really. So we live and we learn. But if we waited to get it to perfect to make the statement, then maybe we wouldn't have got anywhere with any of the asks. So that goes back to my philosophy through this whole time, which is you have to do something, try, and you need to be big enough to move through it if it doesn't go your way.
And I promise you this, if the Fortune 5000 landscape understood that Facebook does what they're asking television to do, it would have been the reverse. It'd be Fox News or CNN or whatever a brand sits on that be getting boycotted. This was optically good and doesn't really affect my business because my internal MMM or MMA show that it does. And that is the biggest reason 90% of Fortune 500 consumer packaged good brands are losing market share.
Yeah. Well.
There's a real war out there of the haves and have-nots. Let me tell you what was going on in the other side of this conversation. Every VC-backed brand that is DTC or DTC oriented and now in Sephora or in other places was rejoicing in the month of July and August because their CAC and LTV numbers are better than ever, because when you start taking out Unilever and Diageo and PepsiCo's numbers, the cost of getting in front of somebody goes down. There's only one feed.
All right. I want to ask, well, first of all, thank you. It certainly gave us a lot to talk about in the last couple of months,
I got to run. Sophie, I miss you so much. I love you. Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. Bye, Gary.
Bye, everybody. I put my LinkedIn info because I see a lot of people want to ask questions, so it's in the chat. Thanks for everybody for watching.
So, well, thank you.
Take care, mate.
See you again soon. Bye. Thanks. All right. Well, Fast and Furious. So as I said in the beginning of this, and Sophie, thanks for staying on. We're going to do a little bit more in a deep dive into out of home with you as an advertiser. Again, we're all the out of home community here, and we really would like your advice for everyone with an out of home business as to what client leaders like to see from us media owners or the companies in our business, and the sellers right now. So what can we do better? Your thoughts and obviously also based on some of the conversations that we just had with Gary. Sophie, you are both a traditional and an early adopter digital marketing. You have a very long, for those of you who don't know it, and she does not look it, but she does have a very long global advertising career. She spent more than 2 decades on 4 continents and were recruited to Diageo in 2016 as a serious change agent. I think that's really what you are. So I want to hear, before we dive into the world of whiskey and out of home, what's been your biggest contribution so far, to Diageo and, management style wise, being a change agent?
Yeah, I mean, I want to sort of back up and say that the experience going from, you know, our industry into client has been fantastic for me, actually. Albeit comes with its different set of processes, as Gary alluded to. I've learned an enormous amount. And, you know, one of the number one reasons I went to Diageo is because of the values of the company. And, you know, people can say that. And for anyone that knows me, I'm pretty hard about that stuff and pretty cynical. But it is one of the real reasons I went there. And they have a 2030 ambition against D&I, against climate change, against reputational stuff that I super respected. So one of the reasons that I was recruited in, I think, is that, you know, we have a fantastic business in whiskeys, all the scotches, all the malts, all the bourbons, all the Tennessee, the Irish, you name it, we got it. We're very fortunate. And in particular, North American whiskeys business, they wanted some transformation, and they wanted it across not just traditional channels, but they wanted across innovation, across their brand homes and retail experiences that they brought to consumers. But I think also they were looking for more marketers to champion kind of the purpose and understand the connection between what we're trying to do as a company and how that can translate into marketing and how that can translate into selling products. So really, I think in short, it was transformational creative stuff that would feel that it really was rooted in bringing the company's purpose to life across our biggest brands. And then, you know, I was privileged because I was allowed to be a different kind of voice in the room with different experiences. A lot of people join corporates and they're there for 20, 30 years. And I was very, very privileged to have some fantastic mentors that brought me in who allowed me to be me. Because for some people, that wasn't very digestible at times. And that gave me the ability to really forge through and find creative ways to help us transform our experiences. I think, you know, the last 6-7 months, I can't even believe it's 7 months actually, has been a fantastic time in marketing in a lot of ways, and particularly for our business, because whilst we would never want to replicate what we have been through and, you know, just the severe cultural crisis that we're living through consistently, with every major crisis or disruption comes huge opportunity. And I think that what we've been able to do is really lean into what kind of company do we want to be through this time. And, you know, when it came down to it, we had to sit back and say, you know, our purpose is all about celebrating life every day. I mean, when people engage with their favorite alcoholic beverage, it is normally and mostly, hopefully, a moment of joy or enjoyment or with friends or uplifting. So how are we going to do that through this time? And we quickly pivoted to the fact that our brands have a role to support those who've supported us. Okay. And what does that mean? That means the hospitality industry. That means the bars, clubs, restaurants and stages across America. So, you know, you ask about what's been top of mind, Anna, and, you know, I know we've got some work to dive into, but the real focus for us through this period has been how do we do marketing and develop platforms that support the people that have supported us for the many, many years they have. And that has been a, you know, pretty big focus right the way through it.
Yeah. Well, it must have been good to have such a broad background and be so creative in this very difficult time. So that I want to ask you, because you've certainly, as a brand, you're based on a lot of experiential marketing, right? And all of your events, sampling experiences, sports sponsorship, award shows, visitor centers, like the bullet Cathedral of Bourbon in Kentucky, you name it, they all shut down in March, I assume. Or maybe some have remained open, but most of them probably shut
Yeah,
down.
they did. Yeah.
So how did your team and you come up with new consumer experiences, both virtual and physical, in lieu of what you were used to doing?
Yeah, so I think Erica's got a couple of slides, which we don't have to put up. I'll just share them with you, but I will throw some work, or Erica will help me throw some work into the chat that you can have a look at. I mean, number one, the biggest change for us was, how do you create experience virtually that enable people to enjoy our brands, get educated on how to create great craft cocktails, and that support the industry that supports us. So, our initial pivot was, you saw things like Crown Royal, which is a brand that's all about inspiring incredible generosity with its purple bag stuff. And what we did with that was we had generosity hours where, amazingly enough, when we put it out there, all of the influencers and celebrities and singers and songwriters who'd worked with us came forward and said they'll host these hours. And it was a simple mechanic, which is, if you attend, make a drink, post a photo of the drink, hashtag tips from home, and that would trigger a donation from us to the USBG, which is a bartender guild, to help bartenders. Other brands got on board with that. Bullet did its, transferred its physical bartender labs, which are really an educational content series that people come to participate in, to get educated, to share ideas in the trade. We transferred that to a digital platform and actually linked it with consumers so that they could participate. So it was almost like bartenders creating drinks for consumers, consumers making them, consumers tagging them, Diageo donating, right? We got in the game on hand sanitizers, and then we kept going with this, because one of the things we learned from the hospitality industry talking to them is, what we need right now is cash and help, but there's the now, the next, and the beyond. And literally, if you look at, think about your favorite bar or restaurant, at least 50% of those will not survive the next 6 weeks, So what we had to do is get more involved in education. We worked with Bank of America to do a load of rollout seminars to help people get fit for the future and with tools that they need to now. On Bullet, just to pivot slightly, through the pandemic, we decided that everything had been so heavy. So this was the brand that had to connect with consumers, give them a little levity and remind them of their drinking buddies and prompt them to create great drinks and enjoy the same kind of times at home. So you'll see a lovely piece of work there. And then recently on Crown Royal, we have just, and on Bullet actually, we've just taken it one step further from the immediate reaction of finding ways to entertain people, get them engaged, and help the trade, and transferring into long-term platforms. So we launched the Bullet Frontier Fund, which is basically all about funding bartenders, and you'll see a series of work where we've put the bartenders back to work. They're actual bartenders, they're in the ad, and they're nostalgic about bartending at home. It's quite entertaining with a very serious message, which is get involved and help keep your favorite bartender in line. We've partnered with people like Sourced, which are employing out-of-work bartenders to create at-home cocktail delivery. And we're doing content series with the bartender community, which again facilitates donation. Crown has taken a big platform, which is pretty much a national relief position, where we partnered up with Anthony Romanos and Ari Lennox to recreate the old song, If You Want Me to Stay, Sly and the Family Stones. I could sing it to you because I've heard it that many times. It's quite fabulous. Anyway, they did a recreate of that and we released it. And every time you stream that song, it triggers a donation. Well, we're been out there with it for the last 6 days and we've already raised $1.6 million. So, you know, I'm riffing here, but it is about turning your eye to the fact that you can connect with the communities that you belong in. You can do good for the industry that has supported you and be at the heart of recovery through your marketing. So that's what's driving us right now.
Well, thank you, Sophie, and thanks for sort of picking that up. I don't think we are going to share the creative sort of on the screen because I don't want to break again, but for everyone who's interested, it's in the chat box, so copy the link or please view it after. Want to turn to Out of Home. We don't have a lot of time. You know, you've been a long-time fan of Out of Home. We've talked about this prep call, you know, from early days at J. Boulder Thompson to Strawberry Frog to being the CEO of the very kind of creative agency Barbarian Group. What would you say is your proudest work in Out of Home prior to joining Diageo?
Oh, wow. Look, I did a lot of out of home work prior to Diageo, you know, but if I can answer that question by saying my most favorite piece of out of home, which I didn't do, it would be actually my answer. And it would be I still love it today, the British Airways sign near the airport. What's the airport in London? Heathrow, right? Coming into Heathrow, and wow, it shows how long we haven't traveled for. But where it has billboards on either side of the highway, and the little kid is putting their hand into the sky to track the plane, and then the digital billboards are basically telling you where that plane, you know, originated from, where it's going to, or where it's leaving from, and where it's going to. And I still to this day say, wow, like important business message needed about frequency of flights and where you can go to. Incredible use of technology, great creativity, and something that stoppability, okay? So everybody looked at that thing, and then they didn't only look at it, they read about it in every write-up, and I think it's just, it's where the medium really is amazing.
Yeah, no, it's certainly very bombastic, and they're, you know, that's a really great example. But so for us, you know, in the out of home industry, the sellers on this call, what should they offer up as must-haves in the overall media mix modeling?
Yeah, listen, I have a really strong point of view on this. My Johnny Walker campaign that we did is one of my favorite things I've done at Diageo. It was pre-COVID, and we needed to relaunch the brand. The brand was old, tired, and dusty in its visual identity. We always presented it the same way. We let the icon off the leash, and we let the way we presented the bottle and the drinks really fly. And, you know, contact me on LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll send you examples of it. But what was critical about that was I took all the television money and put it into outdoor, because the impact that I could make in the 5 key city strategy that I had identified would be more powerful, and the variety of messaging that I could get out there. So I took impact boards, big famous boards. I took street frequency boards, taxis in New York, digital billboards in Houston, okay? And I then big, what I would call, how would I say it? Like station domination areas, right? To play with the whole suite. So in some places, it was about the bottle and the icon and the Viz ID. In other places like Brookfield, the takeover there, it was about a combination of all of those things, but most importantly, using the digital assets to prompt different messages that I wanted to give people through the day, different drink suggestions, different points to the personal engraving over Christmas that was around the corner in Brookfield. So my big message would be, you have a variety of assets in outdoor, and you can creatively combine them in a market to contain many different levels of a message to get it out there with huge impact. There is nothing more fantastic than walking by a digital bus, I don't know what you call the unit probably, but unit on my way to Midtown and seeing a beautiful piece of film that prompts me to think about that brand. So, you know, my message would be more creative planning in how people put together their messaging and their creative assets to create impact in a local market. I mean, I would have to say, I think voting is a huge opportunity for outdoor coming up. So, and then really understand the business problem and the geo-targeting, because you can do all that really beautifully.
Well, so I want to ask, we have 3 more minutes. So I have a fast question that I really want to ask you, and you answer everything brilliantly. So I hope you can answer this as brilliantly and fast. If there was one thing that you could improve about out of home and how it's transacted, what would that be?
I think the biggest barrier or stress comes in lead times, and, you know, yeah, lead times, and digital is helping a lot with that. Yeah, honestly, I think lead times is probably the biggest barrier. I would say also, you know, now this is me being picky, but consistency of assets, right? So if I want impact and frequency, you know, let's take New York City. We took out Brookfield. We took out the Barclays stairs to the stadium. We took out New York Times. And then we had the taxis. Fantastic, right? Now that might be slightly different to your inventory, but yeah. I would say
how to measure across.
Yeah, right. Because if I go to Houston or Dallas, I have slightly different options and not as great. Then I go to Miami. Okay, I have the tram, but do I get the same visibility? So that's life, because we're painting the world we live in the best possible way, hopefully. But that causes some complication. Doesn't particularly bother me because it makes it a little bit more interesting. But I would say there are some markets where that frequency and just sort of customization could be improved.
Well, Sophie, thank you so much for that. That's a good takeaway for us to go home and mull on and think about how we can improve. I want to thank you for everything you're doing, all the whiskey that I can drink because of you and know about, and, you know, cheer you on for the coming year. Sounds like you're setting it up well. Thank you so much for joining us here. It was a true pleasure to have you here. And thank you to our great audience who stuck with us for a very bumpy but super interesting ride. I hope you had a good time, even though you had to come in and out of it. So thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, drink responsibly, and
exactly.
Drink Diageo. I certainly will when this is over. I need to drink now. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your Tuesday. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everyone.
Care.
Bye.